My name is Evelyn Hartley, and last Tuesday morning began like any other. My husband, Daniel, was in the kitchen flipping dinosaur-shaped pancakes for our 8-year-old daughter, Grace. He always made them on Tuesdays. It was his little tradition, something Grace looked forward to after a sleepy Monday. While he cooked, I packed Grace's lunch, writing her a note on a sticky pink heart like I did every day. Daniel kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "Don't forget the real maple syrup this time. Not that sugary mess." I laughed and rolled my eyes, promising I'd pick it up on my way home. Grace, still in her pajamas, hugged him tightly before heading off to get dressed. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. It was warm and full of routines, full of love. Daniel was only 39. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a kind face that made people trust him instantly. He had a habit of humming old jazz tunes while working, and I used to tease him that he was born in the wrong decade. He had no major health issues. The doctors had mentioned slightly elevated blood pressure during his last checkup, but nothing urgent. Nothing to worry about, they said. Cut back on salt, exercise more, take a daily aspirin. He tried. We both did. But life was busy. We didn't take it seriously. We had no reason to believe we had to. That morning, he left for work with a promise to be back early for Grace's art show at school. He blew kisses from the car as he pulled out of the driveway. I waved back, not knowing that would be the last time I saw him alive. At 10:47 a.m., my phone rang. It was Nina, Daniel's assistant. Her voice trembled. "Evelyn," she whispered, "Daniel collapsed in the middle of a client meeting. They're taking him to Memorial. It's serious." I didn't ask questions. I dropped my coffee mug on the floor, the shatter echoing through the quiet house. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the car. I don't remember driving. Only red lights that blurred as I ran them. Only my breath in my chest, fast and shallow. I arrived at the hospital at 11:28. He had been pronounced dead at 11:23. Massive heart attack. The words were delivered with sterile precision by a doctor I didn't recognize, his voice flat as though he were reading a weather report. I stared at him, unable to speak. Then I ran past him into the room where Daniel lay. He was still warm. Still Daniel. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Wake up, please, just wake up," but his chest stayed still. The rest of the day dissolved into fragments. Signing forms I didn't understand. Calling our neighbor, Claire, to pick up Grace from school. Answering questions about funeral arrangements when I could barely remember my own name. At some point I found myself in the hospital bathroom, gripping the sink, dry heaving into the porcelain. I wanted to scream, to throw things, but all I could do was cry. Long, helpless sobs that felt like they might tear my lungs apart. That night, I had to tell Grace. I picked her up from Claire's house. She ran toward me, smiling, her little backpack bouncing. "Is Daddy at home already?" she asked. I pulled over on the side of the road before answering. I turned to face her and took her hand. "Sweetheart," I began, my voice already breaking, "Daddy got very sick at work today. His heart stopped working. The doctors couldn't fix it. He died." Her face froze. "No," she said softly, "but he promised to come to my art show." I shook my head, and the tears came pouring out. "I'm sorry, baby. He can't come anymore." Grace didn't speak for a long time. Then she let out a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a sob. It was something deeper, a cry from her bones, from the place where her heart was breaking. She climbed into my lap and clung to me, shaking, whispering, "I want Daddy, please, please, I want Daddy." There was nothing I could say. No promise I could make. No comfort big enough. All I could do was hold her. That night, Grace refused to sleep in her room. She curled up beside me, clutching one of Daniel's t-shirts like it was life itself. I waited until she was asleep, then slipped into the bathroom and called my parents. I needed my mother. I needed someone to tell me how to survive this. The phone rang 5 times before she picked up. I could hear music in the background. Laughter. "Evelyn," she said, distracted. "Can I call you back? We're in the middle of Jenna's birthday dinner." I swallowed hard. "Mom," I whispered, "Daniel's dead. He had a heart attack. He's gone." There was silence. Then she said, "Oh my God. Are you sure?" "I saw his body," I replied. My voice was shaking. "There's no mistake." She paused again. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. But Jenna's birthday is today. We've got people here. Can we come tomorrow instead?" Tomorrow. She was asking me to wait. As if grief could be paused. I heard my father in the background asking if Daniel's life insurance was up to date. Not how I was. Not if Grace was okay. Just the money. I hung up. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the bathroom floor and sobbed silently so I wouldn't wake Grace. That night, I learned something I wish I hadn't. Sometimes, when the worst happens, the people you thought would catch you don't even try. Sometimes they're too busy celebrating a birthday to show up when your world ends. And sometimes, the real heartbreak begins after the death. The days leading up to Daniel's funeral blurred into one continuous fog. I moved through time like I was underwater, barely hearing the voices around me. Every task felt impossible. Every breath an effort. Grace slept in our bed every night, waking up often from nightmares, calling for her dad. I'd hold her until she stopped shaking, whispering that it was okay, even when I didn't believe it myself. Daniel's funeral was scheduled for Saturday, 4 days after his death. Those 4 days were filled with logistical hell, death certificates, burial or cremation, obituary drafts, calls to his firm and clients. I barely had the energy to answer the door, but people kept coming. Claire brought food. Nina from Daniel's office came by just to sit with me in silence. Strangers showed more warmth than my own family. My parents had called once. Just once. My mother asked what time the service was and whether it was formal or casual attire. My father asked if Daniel had left me the house or if it would need to be sold. Saturday morning arrived bright and sunny, an insultingly beautiful day. Grace wore a light blue dress, the one Daniel had bought her for her last birthday. "He said I looked like a princess in this," she whispered as I zipped it up. I braided her hair like Daniel used to do for special events. Her small hands trembled as she held mine. We arrived at the funeral home an hour early. I stood near the entrance to greet mourners, trying not to fall apart each time someone said, "I'm so sorry." Daniel's colleagues came in dark suits, many red-eyed and shaken. One after another, they knelt down to speak to Grace, sharing sweet stories about her father. She smiled politely, holding tightly to my hand, but her eyes were distant. My parents and Jenna were supposed to arrive early, but they didn't. 20 minutes before the service began, I received a text, "Traffic is terrible. Be there soon." They finally walked in just as people were being seated. My mother was wearing too much perfume and a dramatic black hat. Jenna was in a cocktail dress that looked more like party wear than mourning. They made a small scene looking for the seats I had saved in the front row. My mother gave me a brief hug. "We had such trouble finding something appropriate on such short notice," she whispered. As if this were a last-minute dinner party and not the funeral of her son-in-law. I barely nodded and sat down, unable to respond. Throughout the service, Jenna kept checking her phone. My father glanced at his watch more than once. Meanwhile, Daniel's brother, Matthew, had flown in from Japan, arriving just hours before. He looked exhausted, but sat quietly beside Grace, holding her hand through the entire ceremony. The two of them had identical eyes, pale blue and filled with tears. When it was my turn to speak, my knees almost buckled. But then I looked at Grace, so small, so brave in her blue dress, and I found the strength. I stepped up to the podium, clutching the paper I'd rewritten a dozen times. I spoke of Daniel's warmth, his goofy jokes, his dedication as a father. I shared his irrational hatred of cilantro, his obsession with using real maple syrup, and how he never missed a single school event, even during the busiest weeks of work. I didn't cry while speaking. The tears came only when I stepped down and saw Matthew whispering something into Grace's ear, making her smile. Back at the house for the reception, things only grew worse. My parents arrived with 2 trays of store-bought cookies and then sat on the couch as if they were guests of honor. They didn't help serve food, didn't check on Grace, didn't even ask me if I needed anything. My mother talked about Jenna's new gallery opening. My father hovered near the drinks table, deep in conversation with my Uncle Alan. I overheard snippets, mentions of Daniel's salary, his investments, the house, the life insurance. I felt sick. Helen and George, Daniel's parents, were the opposite. Despite losing their only son, they showed me more compassion than my own family. Helen made sure Grace had a quiet space to sit and eat. George helped tidy up, organizing dishes and trash bags without being asked. That night, after everyone had gone, they stayed. Helen tucked Grace into bed, brushing her hair and humming the same lullaby she used to sing to Daniel as a boy. George offered to sleep on the couch in case I needed anything in the night. My parents, on the other hand, left right after the reception. My mother kissed my cheek like it was the end of a book club meeting. My father said, "Call us if you need anything," and walked out. They didn't ask how Grace was coping. They didn't even ask how I was holding up. But I heard them. While I cleared plates, I passed by the kitchen and caught my father's voice. Daniel was on the partner track. That life insurance payout must be significant. Evelyn will be set for life. I didn't stop walking. I didn't say anything. But a seed of rage took root in my chest. They weren't here for Daniel. Not really. They were here because they saw death as an opportunity. That night, I found myself standing in Daniel's closet, breathing in the scent of his shirts. Grace was asleep, curled up with Helen beside her. The house was silent. I opened the top drawer of Daniel's dresser, where he kept loose change and receipts. There, tucked beneath an envelope of old movie stubs, was a sealed letter with my name on it. It was in his handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. The date was from 3 months earlier. "My dearest Evelyn," it began, *if you're reading this, then something has gone wrong. I didn't want to worry you, but the doctors mentioned concerns about my heart. I've made sure everything is in place, wills, insurance, trusts for Grace. Please don't let anyone pressure you. Especially your father. He's asked me for financial help more than once, disguised as investments. I declined. I trust you to protect Grace's future. I love you with all that I am, *. I folded the letter slowly, the words burning into my soul. Daniel had known. And he had tried to shield me even from beyond the grave. Suddenly, everything felt clear. The detachment at the funeral. The gossip by the drinks table. The eerie silence from my parents before their sudden interest in my finances. They were planning something. And I needed to be ready. 2 weeks had passed since Daniel's funeral. I was beginning to understand how grief didn't just come in waves, it came in tsunamis. Some mornings, I woke up thinking he was still in the shower, humming some jazz tune. Then reality struck. Other times, I was too numb to cry. Grace had returned to school that week. Her teacher, Mrs. Klein, sent me regular updates. "She's quieter," she wrote one day, "but kind. She's drawing a lot of suns and lakes." I understood. Daniel used to take her to the lake every summer. They'd throw pebbles and talk about what clouds looked like. She missed that peace. That morning, I was sorting through paperwork at the kitchen table, medical bills, insurance forms, the usual flood that follows death, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the peephole and froze. My parents. Walter and Linda Fields. My father adjusting his golf shirt like he was meeting a client. My mother fixing her lipstick in a compact mirror. I hesitated, heart pounding. Grace was at school. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But another part knew better. If I didn't open the door, they'd just find another way in, metaphorically or otherwise. I opened it. I wasn't expecting you, I said, keeping my tone neutral. My mother stepped past me without waiting for an invitation. We thought we'd check in. See how you're doing. And how Grace is adjusting. I raised an eyebrow. She's at school. Perfect, my father said, walking inside and making himself comfortable on the couch. We can speak openly. That should have been my first warning. But I was too tired to argue. I poured coffee and went into automatic hostess mode. They sat in my living room, surveying it like real estate agents. My father's eyes lingered on the new sound system Daniel had installed last month. Nice speakers, he commented. He had good taste. He did, I replied quietly. After some small talk about my mother's garden club and Jenna's art studio, my father cleared his throat. That familiar signal. Evelyn, we came today to talk about your situation, he said, placing his mug neatly on a coaster. My situation? Your financial situation, my mother clarified, folding her hands in her lap. Now that Daniel is gone, and you're adjusting to life without him. I blinked. What are you getting at? Well, my father began, your mother and I are not as young as we used to be. Our retirement savings took a hit recently. Healthcare costs are climbing, and, frankly, we're concerned. I waited, dread crawling up my spine. Concerned, about what? About being left behind, he said plainly. We know Daniel was doing well at the firm. The insurance payout must be generous. And since you're now in a more stable financial position, we were hoping you could assist. The word hung in the air. Assist. Assist you? I asked slowly, trying to keep my voice even. How much were you thinking? My mother looked uncomfortable. My father, however, perked up. We were thinking something meaningful. Substantial. Perhaps 50% of the insurance. That would cover our retirement and allow you and Grace to move forward comfortably. I stared at them. You want half of what Daniel left us? It's not just about money, my father said, as if insulted. It's about family. About helping each other. Helping each other, I echoed. Like how you helped me when Daniel died? Like staying at Jenna's birthday party instead of coming to my side? My mother winced. That was a mistake. But it was already underway. The caterers were there. The guests had arrived. And Daniel had just died. Now Evelyn, my father interrupted, let's not get emotional. This is about practicalities. And we did attend the funeral. I stood, unable to stay seated. How generous of you. To grace us with your presence. My mother began again, we're your parents. We raised you. We paid for your education. Helped with your first home. You owe us some consideration. Consideration? I whispered. My husband just died. My daughter lost her father. And you're standing here like you're negotiating a business deal. Daniel should have taken better care of his health, my father muttered. That did it. Get out. Evelyn, be reasonable, my mother said, trying to soothe me. I said get out of my house, I snapped, pointing to the door. You came here to strip away what little peace I have left. You saw your son-in-law's death as an opportunity. You don't get to do that. Not to me. Not to Grace. They rose slowly, wounded pride evident in every movement. You're being dramatic, my father said. No, I replied, trembling. I'm finally seeing things clearly. They left in a huff. I didn't say goodbye. That afternoon, when I picked up Grace, she seemed more withdrawn than usual. On the ride home, she asked, why were Grandma and Grandpa here today? I didn't answer right away. They came to talk. She looked at her lap. About Daddy's money? I glanced at her. Why do you say that? At the funeral, she whispered, I heard Grandpa talking to Uncle Alan. He said we were going to be rich now. The pit in my stomach widened. Daddy made sure we'd be okay, I said carefully. But that money can't bring him back. Grace nodded, her voice quiet. I would give all the money in the world just to have him back. Me too, I said softly. That night, I called Matthew in Japan. When I told him what happened, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, if Daniel had known this would happen, he would have built a fortress around that money. He tried, I told him. He left me a letter. He knew. He knew my father might come for it. Then you need to finish building that fortress, Matthew said firmly. And you need help. The next day, I met with Richard Cohen, our family's estate attorney. I explained everything. He looked over Daniel's documents, nodding as he went. Everything's in order, he said at last. The will is clear. You're the sole beneficiary. Your parents have no legal claim. Can they contest it? I asked. They can try, he said, but it wouldn't hold. No grounds. It would be harassment more than a case. It should have made me feel safe. But somehow, it made me more afraid. Because people like my father didn't need legal footing to cause damage. They just needed a reason. And now they had one. The texts started arriving that evening. First from my father, we need to discuss this situation like adults. Call me. Then my mother, I raised you better than this, Evelyn. Family comes first. And finally, Jenna, you've always been selfish, but this is low even for you. Mom and Dad deserve better. I didn't respond. The next morning, another message pinged. A voicemail this time. My father again. There will be a family meeting this Sunday at 2. Bring Grace. This concerns all of us. I set the phone down without replying. The audacity of demanding my presence after trying to strip Grace's future away enraged me. But something told me I needed to go. Not for them. For closure. For the truth to be said aloud. Grace was sitting at the table coloring when I told her. They want us to come over on Sunday, I said carefully. Do we have to? She asked, her crayon hovering in midair. I think we should, I replied. So they can hear what needs to be said. She looked thoughtful. Can I bring something with me? I have an idea. What kind of idea? I asked. Something Daddy taught me, she said simply. About standing up for yourself. That weekend, she worked on her mystery project in her room with intense focus. I caught glimpses of paper, markers, a ruler. She brushed me off when I asked. You'll see, she said, giving me a smile so much like Daniel's it hurt to look at. Sunday arrived cloudy and humid. The kind of heavy day where storms seemed to hide in the air. As we drove to my parents' house, Grace sat beside me, unusually quiet, the manila envelope she had prepared clutched tightly in her arms. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed several extra cars. Not just my parents' and Jenna's, but my Uncle Alan's, my Aunt Teresa's, and my father's brothers. They had invited an audience. probably thinking I'd be more easily pressured in front of extended family. We walked to the door hand in hand. My mother opened it wearing pearl earrings and a face of carefully arranged concern. "Evelyn, Grace. Come in. Everyone's waiting." They were all gathered in the living room like a tribunal. My father in his recliner, Jenna sprawled on the sofa's armrest, the rest seated in rows like it was some formal presentation. "We appreciate you coming," my father said, not bothering with pleasantries. "There are important matters to resolve." "I'll stand," I said, my voice calm. Grace remained at my side. "And anything you have to say, you can say in front of her." "That's hardly appropriate," my mother said, shooting a glance at Grace. "If it's not appropriate for her to hear," I replied, "then it's not appropriate to discuss." My father cleared his throat, irritated. "Let's get to the point. Your mother and I believe that given the financial stability you've inherited, it's fair that you support the family in return." "Support?" I asked. "Support how?" "We've outlined a distribution," he said, passing me a document. 50% for your mother and me. 15% to help Jenna get back on her feet. You and Grace can keep the rest. It's more than generous. I scanned the paper. Dollar amounts. Totals. Itemized like a business contract. "You discovered the insurance amount," I said. "How?" "Uncle Alan has connections," my father said without shame. "You want 65% of the money Daniel left us," I said flatly. "Money he worked for. That he intended for his daughter's future." "Family takes care of family," my mother said. "You've always had more than Jenna. It's only fair." "Fair," I said, a bitter laugh catching in my throat. "Fair like how you didn't leave Jenna's birthday party when I called crying because my husband had died? That kind of fair?" Aunt Teresa shifted awkwardly. Even Uncle Alan looked mildly uncomfortable. "Let's not dwell on the past," my father said. "You owe us this, Evelyn. We raised you. You weren't exactly cheap." Grace let go of my hand. She stepped forward, tiny but steady, holding her envelope with both hands. "I have something," she said clearly, her voice soft but determined. My mother smiled condescendingly. "Sweetheart, the adults are—" "This is important," Grace interrupted. She opened the envelope and handed my father a sheet of paper. It was hand-drawn, decorated with colored borders and stickers. Across the top in blocky letters, "Bill for real love and support." Below that, line items. "Being there when Daddy died, $0, not provided. Helping Mommy when she cried, $0, not provided. Hugging me when I was sad, $0, not provided. Being real grandparents, priceless, but not earned." At the bottom, total due, $0.00. The room fell silent. My father's hands shook slightly as he held the paper. My mother's carefully set face cracked, eyes welling but no words forming. Jenna stared at Grace like she didn't recognize her. "You only came when you wanted money," Grace said. "You weren't there when we needed you. That's not what family does." No one moved. No one breathed. I stepped forward. "We're done here. Don't contact me again unless it's with a sincere apology and real change. Grace deserves better than this." "So do I." We turned and walked out. No one tried to stop us. In the car, I buckled Grace in and touched her cheek. "That was incredibly brave," I said. She looked up at me. "Was I right, Mommy?" "Yes," I whispered, blinking back tears. "You were absolutely right." My phone buzzed all the way home with missed calls and messages. I didn't answer any of them. Because that day wasn't about negotiation. It was about ending the silence. The drive home from my parents' house was strangely quiet. Not the kind of silence that weighed heavy with regret, but a cleansing one, like the sound right after a storm passes. Grace sat in the back seat, gazing out the window, still clutching the now empty envelope. I glanced at her through the rearview mirror and saw something new in her posture, a firmness, a confidence that hadn't been there before. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed someone sitting on our front porch. It was Matthew. He stood up as we approached, and Grace squealed, running to hug him. "Uncle Matt," she shouted. "You're back." He picked her up and spun her around. "Early surprise," he said, smiling. "I couldn't let you two face all of this alone." His eyes met mine, and there was a quiet understanding in them. He had read between the lines of our late-night calls and messages. Over dinner, we recounted everything that had happened at my parents' house. Grace explained her invoice, and Matthew leaned back in his chair, whistling softly. "She gets that from Daniel," he said. Creative, honest, and perfectly timed. Later that night, once Grace was asleep, Matthew and I sat on the porch with mugs of tea in hand. I told him about the texts, the letters, the persistent attempts from my parents to reach out, each one tinged with guilt, anger, or veiled threats. "They're not done," I said. "They think they still have a chance to wear me down." "Do you want to cut them off completely?" he asked. I hesitated. I don't know. Part of me says yes. But then I think about Grace. Are bad grandparents better than no grandparents? Matthew nodded slowly. It's not about erasing them. It's about drawing the line. Maybe the door stays closed. Maybe one day it cracks open. But you decide. On your terms. Not theirs. That night, I wrote a single text to my mother. Asterisk, there's nothing more to discuss until you fully acknowledge the harm you've caused and show lasting change. Grace and I need space. Do not contact us unless it's to support that healing. All other messages will be ignored. Asterisk, then I blocked their numbers. The next morning, my phone showed 11 missed calls and several messages from unknown numbers, family members they'd enlisted to plead their case. One from Aunt Teresa. One from Jenna. Even Uncle Alan. I didn't answer. I forwarded them all to Richard Cohen, our lawyer, just in case. Then I called Grace's school and informed the principal of the situation. Only I or Matthew Hartley are allowed to pick her up, I said. No other family members. They understood. Principal Sanders assured me they'd take every precaution. The warning proved necessary. 3 days later, my mother showed up at the school without notice. Grace saw our car from the classroom window and told the teacher. They immediately alerted the office, who called me. By the time I arrived, security was already escorting my mother to the sidewalk. She looked disheveled, flustered. Like she hadn't expected to be challenged. You're turning her against us, she snapped when she saw me. No, I said. Your actions are doing that. Don't come to her school again. We're her grandparents, she insisted, tears forming. You can't just erase us from her life. I'm not erasing you, I replied evenly. I'm protecting her. And if you want a place in her life, you'll have to earn it. She didn't reply. Just stood there, holding her purse like a shield, as I walked past her. That night, I found Grace curled up on the couch, watching an old video of Daniel and her dancing in the kitchen. She looked up at me and asked, "Do you think Grandpa and Grandma will change?" I sat down beside her. I don't know, sweetheart. But if they do, it'll take time and effort. Real effort. She nodded. Okay. But for now, can it just be us? Yes, I whispered, pulling her close. Just us. And Uncle Matt. And Grandma Helen and Grandpa George. She smiled. The ones who love without asking for anything back. Over the next few weeks, our house became a sanctuary. Helen and George visited often, bringing warmth and peace with them. George helped Grace build a kite for her school project. Helen taught her how to bake Daniel's favorite cookies, oatmeal raisin with too much cinnamon, just the way he liked them. Matthew stayed longer than planned, extending his leave from the university. Daniel made me promise, he said, that if anything ever happened to him, I'd look after you both. I'm just keeping my word. One morning, Grace handed me a folded note. It was a list. At the top, who is our real family? Beneath that, Mommy, Daddy in heaven, Uncle Matt, Grandma Helen, Grandpa George, Aunt Claire, next door, Nina, Dad's office, Principal Sanders, the cookie lady at the farmer's market. At the bottom, she had drawn a big heart around all their names. That list became my compass. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received a letter in the mail from my father. It wasn't printed. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten, in neat cursive I hadn't seen since my childhood. The envelope was plain, addressed simply to Evelyn. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Dear Evelyn and Grace, it began. We've spent the past few weeks reflecting on our behavior. There are no excuses. We failed you. We failed Daniel's memory. And we failed as parents and grandparents. If we are ever to have a place in your lives again, it must be on your terms. We hope someday you'll allow us to try to earn that trust back, not through words, but through actions. No demands. No guilt. Just a fragile attempt at remorse. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I tucked the letter into the same drawer that held Daniel's final note to me. One a warning. One a possibility. Both reminders of who we had been, and who we might still become. For now, the silence was not a punishment. It was a boundary. And for the first time, it felt like peace. A month passed with no contact from my parents. No surprise visits. No guilt-laced letters. No more relatives trying to intervene. The quiet was a strange kind of comfort. I focused on rebuilding routines, rebuilding trust with Grace, and most of all, rebuilding my own strength. Matthew, true to his word, extended his stay indefinitely. He transformed Daniel's old home office into a temporary workspace and filled the house with laughter I hadn't heard since before the funeral. Grace adored him. She followed him around the house, asking endless questions, and he answered each one patiently, even when they were completely ridiculous. It made the house feel alive again, like the air had changed. One Sunday morning, I sat with Matthew on the back porch. Grace was inside, writing his story for school titled The Girl Who Drew a Line. She had started it after the meeting at my parents' house and had been working on it every day. It was about a young girl who realized not all grown-ups were good, and how she learned to protect herself with the help of a guardian lion. The lion, of course, had blue eyes and a crooked smile, just like Daniel. As we sipped our coffee, I finally showed Matthew the handwritten letter from my father. He read it silently, then handed it back. It's different, he said. But different doesn't mean enough. Exactly, I replied. They haven't earned their way back. Not yet. That afternoon, we organized a small memorial on what would have been Daniel's 40th birthday. Nothing formal, just family and a few close friends. We decorated the backyard with string lights, placed framed photos on a table, and set up a fire pit where people could sit and share stories. Grace made a memory book filled with drawings of her and Daniel, her on his shoulders, him pushing her on a swing, both of them laughing in the kitchen. Each page had a caption in her careful handwriting. My favorite laugh. His pancake face. The best hug. Helen and George brought a photo album of Daniel's childhood. We laughed over the bowl haircut he had in 3rd grade, the weird magic tricks he used to perform for the family. Claire from next door brought Daniel's favorite cookies and told a story about the time he helped her fix her fence in the middle of a thunderstorm. It was the first time since the funeral that I felt something close to joy. My parents were not invited. As the evening wound down, Grace curled up beside me on the porch swing. The fire crackled, and the last rays of sunlight painted the sky gold. She looked up at me and whispered, "Do you think we could invite Grandma and Grandpa next time? If they say sorry for real?" I looked at her, surprised. "Do you want to see them again?" She nodded, her face thoughtful. "Maybe. Just to see if they really changed. Daddy always said that real sorry isn't what you say. It's what you do." I kissed the top of her head. "We'll see, sweetheart. If they keep showing us they're different, maybe one day." The next week, I received another letter. This one from my mother. It came with a wrapped package labeled for Grace. Inside was a children's book about stars and constellations, something Grace had recently started reading about. There was also a card in my mother's handwriting that simply said, *, I hope this is more your style. Love, Grandma, *. There was no mention of money. No mention of the past. Just a book and a quiet gesture. Grace read the book that night and placed it on her shelf, right between Charlotte's Web and The Wild Robot. She picked something I actually like, she said, a hint of surprise in her voice. That's new. That was the first moment I considered cracking the door open. We arranged a short, carefully structured visit. A public place, 15 minutes, with me present the entire time. Grace chose her favorite ice cream shop. They arrived on time, dressed simply, no theatrics. They didn't hug without asking. They didn't bring up money. They asked Grace about school and listened, truly listened, to her answers. My mother teared up when Grace showed her a drawing of Daniel flying through the stars. They didn't ask for a second visit. They didn't demand forgiveness. They said thank you and left without trying to linger. In the days that followed, they didn't text. They didn't push. They respected the boundary, and for once, it felt like maybe they were learning. Meanwhile, life carried on. Grace got a part in the school play. Matthew began interviewing for a teaching position nearby. Helen and George invited us on a road trip to the mountains that Daniel had loved as a boy. I started seeing a therapist who helped me unpack the complicated grief I'd been carrying, not just from losing Daniel, but from finally recognizing how deeply my family had failed me over the years. And I began something else, small, but meaningful. I launched a foundation in Daniel's name, focused on financial literacy for single-parent families. It felt right, continuing the work he loved in a way that gave back. One morning, Grace came downstairs holding a new drawing. It was a house on a hill with 2 front doors. One was open wide with people coming in and out, Matthew, Helen, George, Claire. The other was closed with a small welcome mat that read "Try gently." "That's our family now," she explained. "Some people live inside. Some just get to visit sometimes." I hugged her tightly, marveling at her ability to see the world so clearly, so kindly. Our family wasn't traditional anymore. It wasn't blood that held it together. It was love. Respect. The willingness to show up when it mattered. To change. To listen. To try again, carefully, humbly. And for now, that was enough. A door left slightly open. Not because we were ready to forget, but because we were brave enough to see what healing might look like. 1 year after Daniel's death, Grace and I stood by the lake where he used to take us. The wind danced over the water, sending ripples across the surface. The trees were beginning to turn, their edges tinged with amber and gold. It was quiet here, the kind of quiet that didn't demand answers or force you to speak. Just the sound of waves kissing the shore and the leaves rustling above. Grace skipped a smooth stone across the water, her arm just like Daniel's, flicking from the elbow with precision. 3 skips, she counted. Not bad. He taught you well, I smiled. I can still hear his voice when I do it, she said softly. It had been a year of heartbreak, confrontation, and healing. A year of peeling back layers I hadn't realized were there. Of discovering how grief didn't only take from you, it also revealed. It showed me who was real and who wasn't. Who stayed and who faded. Who demanded and who gave freely. Somewhere in that year, we found our balance again. Matthew had officially moved back, accepting a full-time position at the local university. His house was just a 10-minute walk from ours, and he stopped by most days. Sometimes for dinner. Sometimes just to read Grace a chapter from her favorite book. His presence had become part of our rhythm. Helen and George visited monthly, and when they couldn't come, they called. They sent postcards from every place they traveled, always addressed to our brave Grace. They never missed a school performance, a science fair, or a single important day. They honored Daniel not with mourning but with the way they loved the family he left behind. The foundation we started in Daniel's name had grown beyond what I imagined. We held monthly workshops for single mothers navigating sudden financial responsibility. We taught budgeting, estate planning, insurance basics. Every session ended with a small plaque that read, "In honor of Daniel Hartley, who believed that good people deserve good tools." And my parents? They had stayed consistent. They didn't push. They didn't ask for money. They respected the boundaries I laid out like a fragile rope across a canyon. They attended Grace's 9th birthday, quietly sitting in the back of the park, offering a simple gift, a telescope. Grace loved it. 2 weeks later, I received a handwritten letter from my father. It was short. *, we're still learning. We know it's not enough. But we are trying. If there's ever anything you want us to do, just tell us. Not for us. For her, *. I didn't reply. But I didn't block the number either. We were no longer enemies. We were apart. But not against. The biggest surprise came from Jenna. Nearly a year after the confrontation, she emailed me. Evelyn. *, I was jealous. I always have been. Not of Daniel or the money, but of how grounded you are. How you always knew who you were. I didn't know how to be that kind of person, so I tore you down instead. I'm sorry. I really am. I've started therapy. I'm trying to understand the damage I caused, and how to fix it, *. You don't owe me anything. But I wanted you to know, *. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was truth. And that was more valuable. On the anniversary of Daniel's death, we held a quiet service in our backyard. Just those who had truly been there. Grace read a letter she wrote to him. She didn't cry. Not once. But her voice trembled with every word. Dear Daddy. *, we miss you every day. But we're okay now. We are safe. I'm learning to cook pancakes, but mine still don't look like dinosaurs. Uncle Matt says I'm getting close. Mommy's strong. She made a school for grown-ups in your name. And I have a telescope now so I can look for you in the stars. If you're up there, can you see us? We're smiling today. Not because we forgot you, but because you taught us how to keep going. I love you. Always, *. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the yard. That night, we sat around the fire pit again. Claire brought her famous lemon bars. Nina, Daniel's old assistant, told a story about how Daniel once bought every intern coffee during a snowstorm, just because they looked cold. George laughed at that. Classic Daniel, he said. As the fire crackled and the stars began to appear, Grace leaned into my shoulder. Mom, she whispered, I think Daddy would be proud of how we're doing. I know he would, I said, kissing her forehead. In the quiet that followed, I looked around at the people gathered in our yard, not the family I was born into, but the one we built. A mosaic of kindness, loyalty, and love. People who had earned their place. Who had proven their hearts in the darkest times. Daniel's legacy wasn't the money. It was this. A daughter who knew her worth. A wife who remembered how to stand. A family defined not by blood, but by presence. And a life that, even in absence, still shimmered with love. As we packed up for the night, Grace looked up at the stars through her telescope. "I found one," she said, pointing. "That one's his." I wrapped an arm around her. "Then that's the one we follow."